Sorry guys, no video today, I don't feel so good. Oh. I appear to have evolved. Okay. The background's changed too, that's kinda neat. So it's been a while, huh? Okay, the last proper video I posted was sort of 2 months ago, but to be fair, I've suddenly had a lot less free time on my hands to be able to make videos since starting going to college, so I think I have a right to be a little bit flaky. But I'm back, I think, and what better way to come back than with my most recent hyperfixation. So I've been wanting to reimagine the Batman universe for a while. The Batman franchise seems to be a gift that keeps on giving, with so many different reboots and interpretations over the years. One day I was ranting to my dad about how cool it would be to be able to take my own spin on the franchise, to which he said something along the lines of, "Why don't you then?" So here we are. I want to make it clear, this isn't just me redesigning the characters. I am completely reimagining the entire universe, tweaking old lore, creating new lore, and making this entire thing my own over the course of a few videos, so I will inevitably make some decisions with the characters that will make some people upset or just won't be people's favourite interpretations, and that's okay. Also, I may make a comic series involving these characters in the future on something like AO3 or some other platform that I can't make money on to avoid copyright, because being able to cook with this franchise has been one of my dreams, and maybe DC will hire me. Also, in case you didn't read the title, in this video I will be covering the Bat family, minus Alfred, love you king, and I will be covering the Rogues Gallery in the future, which I'm very excited about. So, without any further ado, let's begin. So firstly, I'd like to make it clear that I did not include every single member of the Bat family to ever exist in my version. I found that the Bat family has been growing and growing so much that it's become very convoluted, and there have been so many characters added to the roster that they are impossible to keep track of, so I've decided to only add either the ones I'm familiar with, and 1 or 2 fan favourites or characters that have potential in my opinion. Granted, there are still 11 members, 12 including Alfred, which is still probably too many, but it's still significantly less overkill than how many? 32 members! What?! Okay, so I've removed approximately 20 members that didn't need to be there. Who the fuck? So the members that I've kept from left to right are Bruce, obviously, Damian, Cassandra, Barbara, Dick, Jason, Tim, who now has a different name, but I'll get into that in a minute, Luke, also has a different name now, Stephanie, Duke, and Selena. I wasn't familiar with Luke, Duke, or Stephanie before making this video, but Duke and Stephanie were fan favourites, so I looked into them, and I also figured Luke had some potential, so they're here too. This was also my first time structuring a speed paint video in this way. I wanted to get the entire Bat family done in one video, but figured 11 separate speed paints in one video is way too much visually to keep track of, and I figured it would also help to have them all to scale, as they're the characters that will be interacting the most. So let's start with the man in the title, shall we? There have been a lot of different interpretations of Batman over the years, but there are a few constants not including the very first depictions. He's always a tortured soul, he always has the same backstory, and he almost always has a no-killing rule. Out of all of the depictions of Bruce Wayne that I've seen, my personal favourite as of recent has been Robert Pattinson in the Batman 2022. And Lego Batman. One of my favourite video essays is one by a YouTuber called Lancelotti, who made a video talking about the film and why an immature Bruce Wayne, like the one depicted in the film, makes for a better depiction of Batman, and I agree. However, I do believe that there is a fine line to walk between making Batman a flawless, wise symbol of justice, and a bitter, corrupt, and frankly unlikable arsehole. I think that Bruce in the Batman does this very well, but it does this by depicting a much younger version of Bruce Wayne who's only just starting out. This Bruce is very skilled and empathetic like you could expect from Batman, and his motivation is correct, but he's ignorant, stubborn, and frankly quite privileged. This doesn't make the audience hate him, however, as it's presented in a believable way and is something he manages to overcome by the end of the movie. I like that, and I want to steal that part of Bruce for my version. I also wanted to take Batman's no-killing rule and expand on it a little bit. A common character trait with Batman is that despite his trauma and occasionally cold demeanour, his greatest strength is his empathy. He always tries to empathise with the members of his rogues gallery, hence the no killing rule, because he wants to believe that there's good in everyone and no one deserves to die. I love this character trait, but it becomes a bit of a stretch when you take a character like the Joker, for example, someone who not only has made it clear time and time again that he is pretty much pure evil and will not be changing, but also someone who consistently goes out of his way to torment Bruce and sometimes kill the people Bruce cares about, and still have him refuse to kill him even when given the chance. I mean, it gets to a point where it feels less like a character trait and more like an excuse to have the Joker still be alive. So instead of getting rid of this character trait outright, I decided to lean into it further. What if Bruce's empathy isn't just his greatest strength, but his greatest weakness as well? Bruce's trauma has made the idea of any form of death feel too cruel of a punishment for anyone, especially if he were to force it upon someone with his own hands. It's not that he won't kill, it's that he can't. This would not only make for a great character arc throughout the story and present an excellent moral dilemma, but would also explain why Bruce will go to such lengths to avoid killing. For his costume, I didn't change much, as the original costume is very recognisable at this point. I decided to add in a few elements inspired by the Enforcer uniforms from Arcane, as I wanted his costume to feel a little more commanding. Here is the finished character sheet for Bruce Wayne / Batman.
Hey fellas, wherever I go, the wind follows. And the wind, it smells like rain. It's 1933, and I'm a private eye. I like to drink egg creams, and I like to fight Nazis. A lot. Sometimes I let matches burn down to my fingertips just to feel something, anything. Oh.
Now moving on to the most recent boy wonder, Robin, or Damian Wayne. So out of all of the Bat family, unfortunately Damian is the least developed as of this point in time. I have glimpses of what I want his backstory and arc to be, like how he's a clone of Bruce, or that he's emotionally repressed. Pretty good stuff to start with. However, I haven't quite found my footing yet when it comes to his role in the story. Now, I will be expanding his character in the future, don't panic Damian Wayne fans, but given I was writing 10 other characters at the time, he just got a little lost in translation, so there isn't as much to talk about when it comes to Damian currently. I can talk about his design though. So looking at Robin's various designs over the years, none of them are really giving Robin as in the bird. So I wanted to incorporate more bird-like elements into his design. I made his mask pointed, and I wanted it to resemble that of a bird's head shape and beak. I found that it does look slightly similar to the Court of Owls masks, and I don't know if Damian was ever involved with them, but it would be a cool coincidence. I was also looking over various redesigns of the character, and I saw one person give his cape some triangle strips to give them a silhouette of Robin wings, which I really liked and definitely incorporated. I had his suit be quite armoured and padded, as Damian is quite practical and also works with a lot of bladed weapons, and I kept the typical Robin colour palette for this design. Here is the character sheet for Damian Wayne / Robin.
Well, I like peanut butter, and I like peanut butter cookies, but I hate peanuts. They're so dry. Also, I sweat a lot. I mean, in general, unrelated to the peanuts.
Now let's talk about Cassandra Cain. So, when it came to Batgirl, I had 3 options for the character. The first was Barbara, the original Batgirl, who from the very beginning was kinda out of the question for me, as I like her as Oracle much more, which I'll get into soon. The second was Stephanie, who I believe is the current Batgirl in canon, and I didn't really want her as Batgirl either. The character I made this version of Stephanie is much more tied to her backstory, so I felt keeping her as spoiler worked much better and also simplified the lore surrounding the Batgirl title a bit more. And so I settled with keeping Cassandra as Batgirl, as I always found that she was my favourite Batgirl due to how unique her version of the title was and how much more connected she is with Bruce in my universe. So I kept her backstory relatively the same, having her be trained by her father from a young age to be the ultimate bodyguard for Ra's al Ghul. Her mother, Lady Shiva, was absent from her childhood, leaving her to be raised by her cold-hearted father. She was never taught how to talk, only how to understand language, so that she could understand orders but was never left open for negotiation with her victims. She was trained to do nothing but fight and serve, having it be drilled into her brain that she was only worth the physical feats she could accomplish. When she was finally deemed ready at the age of 17 after an extensive test battle that she only left with a gash on her leg, she became Ra's al Ghul's bodyguard, only to lose against her first fight with Batman after the injury her father had ordered her to neglect took a toll on her body. Quickly realizing she would be killed for losing the fight, Batman took her to Wayne Manor to treat her wounds in safety. After waking up and realizing what had happened, she fell into a deep despair, unable to accept her failure without breaking down. Bruce consoled her, letting her know that she was safe and it was okay to feel the way she did. When her father came back, Bruce tried to fight him off to keep her safe, but was only able to succeed with the help of Cassandra, displaying her incredible fighting skills now that she was healed. Later on, she would take on the title of Batgirl, now living in Wayne Manor with Bruce and Damian. I decided to have her be partially mute, and when she does talk, it's mostly short, blunt sentences or sign language. I want her arc to be one of self-discovery over the course of the story, as she slowly begins to build a sense of self and relive the childhood she missed out on with her new family and friends. With her design, I didn't really change much, just adding a few extra details here and there to make it a little more interesting. Here is the finished character sheet for Cassandra Cain / Batgirl.
I thought my life was boring in the Fire Nation, but this place is unbearably bleak. Nothing ever happens.
Next up, we have Barbara Gordon. Now, I already mentioned that I have decided to keep her as Oracle for a couple reasons. One is that I feel like Barbara is at her best when she's taking the role of Oracle. Not only is she incredibly capable as she was before, but she takes on so many more skills and character traits, whereas before when she was Batgirl, she felt a little one-note for me. Another, and my main reason for keeping her as Oracle, is that I'm aware that in the comics, the writers decided to give her the ability to walk again, and I don't like that very much. The implication here is that Barbara being wheelchair-bound was a hindrance to her capabilities, which is not only problematic, but is shown time and time again to be blatantly untrue from how skilled she continues to be in combat and when staying at home on the comms. She continues to be an invaluable part of the team when disabled, and so giving her the ability to walk again just feels so pointless and frankly a little bigoted. So no, I'm not doing that. I also gave her a hero costume because I figured it would look sick, and if she's still going to be in on the action, she's going to need one. For her costume, I had her mask and headphones be connected into this headpiece type thing, with little bat ears on the top. I wanted her outfit to be a sort of merge of the kind of clothes she wears as Oracle in canon, and her old Batgirl suit, so I gave her a cool cropped jacket over the rest of her suit, and kept the colour palette a mix of purple, yellow, and teal. I also wanted to redesign her wheelchair to make it more technologically advanced, as functionally that would be better for fighting / hacking stuff, and visually it would go hard. I just sort of didn't really do that here yet, but I will. I also thought it would be a cool concept for her to occasionally bring a giant mech to fights. I saw someone say this in a video about Barbara, and so yeah, I couldn't not do this, it's just so cool. Here is the finished character sheet for Barbara Gordon / Oracle.
Hey guys, I'm from another dimension. I mean, another dimension. So now I save everyone else. And I don't do friends anymore. Just to avoid any distractions.
Now let's talk about the first Robin, Dick Grayson. Now, I didn't really want to change that much about Dick's character, as Nightwing is one of my favourite members of the team, but there were a few things that I wanted to either change or expand upon. Firstly, why is everyone so obsessed with this guy's arse? Firstly, I wanted to lean much more into his circus upbringing, not just in his costume, but in his personality as well. I know that Dick was already one of the more cheerful members of the Bat family, but I wanted to lean into that even more. I also wanted to make this cheerful personality a little bit fake. Because he's the oldest apart from Barbara, he kind of feels the need to keep up the team morale, and sees his cheerful demeanour as a way to do that, so plays it up even when he's not feeling cheerful in the slightest. It's very much an act. One could even say, a circus act. I've kept his backstory relatively the same, but I made a couple changes here and there. One is that the Flying Graysons were no longer killed in a circus accident, but a fire that was started by a childhood friend of Dick's who we'll be discussing in a future video. Feel free to guess who this character may be though. I would go into the full backstory, but that would contain spoilers and I don't want to, so instead let's move on to his design. Like I said, I wanted to add more circus and acrobat-esque elements to his design, so I kinda ended up fusing his normal hero costume with his disco suit. And overall, I just made him look as bisexual as possible and called it a day. Here is the finished character sheet for Dick Grayson / Nightwing.
That means we did change the future. We're just in a different, yes, that nerd thing. You know what that means, right? We still have hope. Hey, I like that.
Now let's move on to Jason Todd, or Red Hood. Now, in the current canon, I believe that Red Hood is no longer a villain / antagonist, which I think is a fine concept, but I definitely wanted to keep Red Hood as an antagonist for much longer than in the comics, as I feel like he's much more compelling that way. I want him to haunt the narrative even before he shows up, making him much more intimidating and kind of the ultimate foil for Batman, which is very similar to his first appearance anyway. Jason is another one of the characters that I don't really feel the need to change that much, so there isn't really as much to talk about with him. I think I want to start the story directly after his death, so that he spends a majority of the first 2 chapters being built up to returning, but that could be subject to change. I also have been considering making him a metahuman with Deadpool-style healing abilities, hence his resurrection, instead of the Lazarus Pit, because I don't know why anyone working for Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul himself would decide to resurrect him in the first place, but this is just a concept at the moment and I may scrap this. If this were the case, I'd probably make it so that no one knew about his abilities until after his death, including himself, as he never knew his parents and never had the opportunity to find out about his abilities while still being Robin. For his design, I kept a lot of the stuff the same, just adding a few extra details like gun holsters and armor. I also decided to make his face much more scarred from the Joker incident, as I wanted the impact of that event to be shown through his design. Also, I was showing the finished character sheets to my friend, and she pointed out how short I'd accidentally made Jason's arms, and because I'd already finished all of the rendering, I ended up crashing out a little bit, which led to the creation of Piss Hood. Just thought I'd share that. Here is the finished character sheet for Jason Todd / Red Hood.
Do something that changes her opinion of you, like set a firecracker off in the classroom. That'll never happen. Not a chance. There's no way that girl will ever talk to you. That you learn the secrets to an easy life.
Now let's move on to the character formerly known as Tim Drake, who now goes by Tabitha Drake. That's right, freaks, woke blast! Now, some people are probably going to be quite upset with this decision, that's kind of inevitable. But at the end of the day, I have my reasons for changing the character in this way, and if you have your own interpretation of the character, I would actually love to see some other people's versions of this universe. Also, no, just because she's a girl now doesn't mean she's no longer canonically bisexual. I know there's at least one person that will be hung up on that, so I decided to just put that out there. Now, I not only decided to change Tabitha in this way for something that will happen later on in the story that I can't discuss yet for spoiler reasons, but because I wanted the main theme for her story to be choosing her own identity and that identity being forcefully stripped from her, so I felt that this was the best character to make trans, if any. I really hope that this doesn't count as a controversial decision for the character, but I know that it inevitably will, so to those of you who are upset over having a trans character in my version of the universe in the first place, I'm not sure how you found your way to my channel, but hi, I'm an openly trans guy / non-binary person. Anyway, I also decided to give her a mechanics gimmick, as I felt that out of all of the Robins, Tabs never felt like she had an established fighting style or weapon. Like, Dick is the acrobatics guy, Jason has the guns, Damian has the variety of bladed weapons, so I decided to give Tabs a variety of mechanical weapons that she created herself. I reflected this in her design by making her mask be a pair of goggles, replacing her cape with a large backpack to carry all of her inventions, and giving her a pair of mechanical boots that can do a variety of things, like giving her a speed or jumping boost, or allowing her to walk on walls. Much like Damian, I wanted to add that Robin wing motif somewhere in her design, so I made the end of her jacket have a couple wing-like spikes on the end of them. Here is the finished character sheet for Tabitha Drake / Red Robin.
Sorry, dog, but I can't let you hurt Susan. Time. The answer was probably time, right? Excuse me, Fern needs this bike. It's got that big boy musk. Socks, trash, butt, all the stinks of home.
Next up, we have a pretty interesting pick for me, given that the original character gave me barely anything to work with, and I wasn't originally planning on keeping them at all. The character formerly known as Luke Fox, who is now Lux Fox. Now, the original character of Luke was very much nothing. If I'm being completely honest, I pretty much only picked them because their mech suit was cool. Needless to say, this is barely even the same character anymore. I remember a vague plotline from one of the Batwing comics was that their father, Lucius Fox, wanted them to go to college or something, and Luke, in reference to the old version of the character, was like, "No, Dad, I want to become a superhero and fight zombies in Africa." I don't know, I think they were zombies? Could have just been some guys. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Point is, I decided to take that plotline of their father wanting them to go into Wayne Enterprises and expand on it a little bit. I wanted to start off Lux's story with them being incredibly talented but having no clue what they want to do with it. The feeling of having no idea where their future is going, even after being given such a good head start, is a feeling I can relate to quite heavily, so putting that into the character was a good way of making them an actual character. I want the feeling of not living up to expectations to be a theme for them, even when they take on the title of Batwing and begin fighting crime, which I wanted to reflect in their design by having their mech suit be incomplete, the bottom half just being a pair of baggy jeans. Also, they're non-binary now. Essentially, in order to try and expand on their character, I've put a lot of my own struggles into them, as I feel it'll be much easier to write them from scratch that way. Here is the finished character sheet for Lux Fox / Batwing.
I thought you were dead. Now you show up with a Pilty and give her a tour of the lanes? I didn't know if I could trust you. Gee, I wonder who I learned that from. That's a good way to drive yourself crazy. If I just went with you that day, maybe none of this would have happened.
Next up, we have Stephanie Brown, or Spoiler. Now, Stephanie is, from what I can tell, very much a fan favourite. I didn't really know that much about her, but after doing some research, what I've kinda gathered personality-wise is that she's cheerful and a little bit dorky, which I did try to keep in my version. I kept some elements of her backstory, but changed a couple things here and there. Essentially, Stephanie lived with her mother for most of her life, as her father, Cluemaster, was in Arkham Asylum since she was 4. She was always made aware of her father's criminal history, but even after he'd been let out of captivity, her mother made sure that Stephanie didn't see him. However, eventually he managed to track them down, and one night Stephanie entered her living room just in time to see her father shoot her mother. She managed to escape, living on her own in the streets of Gotham to hide from her father. It was only after being made aware that her father was now considered sane and rehabilitated in the public eye that she took on the identity of Spoiler. Due to her father no longer leaving clues to his crimes, she decided to begin tracking down his various jobs and leaving clues herself, in the hopes of getting him caught. The clues she was leaving got the attention of Batman, and the two managed to track him down and arrest him. Stephanie would continue to work with Batman a few times after this. Now, I changed quite a bit when it came to her design. Due to her being one of the only characters to come from poverty, I wanted that to reflect a bit in her design, making it look much more messy and handmade. I gave her a much stockier build, as I wanted her main fighting style to be kickboxing, and I don't imagine her having a signature weapon aside from whatever is nearby and a blunt object. I kinda wanted her to look a bit like a rogue, so I replaced her hooded cape with a long coat. I gave her a new symbol for the spoiler persona, an exclamation mark to match her whole spoiler gimmick, and I shortened her hair, making it quite unevenly cut with purple ombre at the ends. Here is the finished design for Stephanie Brown / Spoiler.
How come we've never talked about this stuff? Yeah, I mean, there isn't that much to talk about. The Dimetrodon was an apex predator. The most badass predator.
Next up, we have Duke Thomas, yet another character that I knew practically nothing about before writing this video. However, unlike Luke, this character actually gave me plenty of stuff to work with and expand upon, so I'm quite glad of that. Firstly, what stood out most to me was that Duke was the only member of the family that I've come across that was a metahuman, which opened up a whole can of backstory worms for me. Basically, in my universe, I've decided to have metahumans be a type of person localized to Gotham due to some of the lower class or homeless being exposed to toxic fumes which contain the metahuman gene. For the people exposed to the gene, any child born from them has a 45% chance of being born a metahuman, which is essentially just a mutant from X-Men, and they're treated in a very similar way. Metahumans are not only feared and demonized by most demographics in Gotham, but are often captured and experimented on, the owner of the most prominent metahuman experimentation lab being Hugo Strange, in part inspired by his first plotline in the Gotham series. In this universe, this kind of thing has been going on for several decades, and while there are a few small groups that try to spread awareness, the Gotham government makes sure to cover up the operation. I wonder what this could be a metaphor for. Essentially, Duke was raised by his parents in the slums of Gotham, much like Stephanie. Both his parents were metahumans that had escaped captivity from a young age, Duke inheriting the gene and gaining the ability to bend and control light and shadow. Eventually, however, the metahuman experimentation lab they escaped from, ran by Hugo Strange, found them. They had the parents killed to avoid them escaping again and spreading awareness, but after finding out about Duke's abilities, they took him into custody and had him experimented on. This would be his life for the next 7 years, until several of Strange's experiments escaped, Duke being one of the few that were left behind after the lab was shut down and abandoned. However, the breakout caught the attention of Bruce, who decided to investigate the facility. When he got there, he found the metahumans who had been left behind. When the facility was abandoned, the power had been cut, leaving them in complete darkness, but Duke had been creating the only light source for the rest of the metahumans, trying to keep everyone calm and sane. Bruce quickly led the metahumans to safety, starting a charity for them to give them another chance at life. However, impressed by Duke's resilience and leadership, he offered to take him in and Duke accepted, soon after that becoming the Signal, and in turn becoming a signal of hope for the metahumans of Gotham City. Get it? I think this is probably the backstory I've changed the most dramatically, as I don't really know much about Duke's original backstory, but I'm quite proud of it, to be honest. For his design, I wanted to lean very heavily into the whole biker thing he has going on. I didn't really change much from his original design, but made his helmet more covering so that no bugs fly into his mouth while he's speeding along, and I kept the same general colour palette from his original design. Here is the finished character sheet for Duke Thomas / The Signal.
Let me guess, you're from Texas or Utah, someplace dried out and barren, right? I heard about water witching before, but it doesn't make sense. I mean, it's just an ordinary branch. You stomp too hard and you'll fall in it. It's supposed to be so deep. If you fell to the bottom and looked up, you see a sky full of stars in the middle of the day.
And finally, let's talk about Selina Kyle / Catwoman. Now, before you begin to wonder why she's here and not in the Rogues Gallery, I've decided to go down the route of Selina being more of an anti-hero than a straight-up villain, as her crimes are much less heinous, and I wanted to expand a bit more on her relationship with Bruce, which is kinda difficult to do that when they're on opposing sides. So, when it came to Selina, the interpretation I took of the most inspiration from was once again from the Batman 2022, where she's portrayed as more of an anti-hero and, even better yet, as more of a character with her own goals and feelings. We love that, big win for feminists. I wanted to overall desexualize her because, as much as I love pretty ladies, they can be pretty without their heist gear being incredibly impractical. I also decided to lean away from her only personality trait being flirtatious. I mean, sure, she can still be that, but I also decided to lean into her love of mischief and snarkiness. I wanted her to not only steal because she needs the money, but also for a genuine love of the thrill, making it almost an addiction that she could try to overcome over the course of the story. For her design, I took inspiration from actual heist gear and gave her more coverage on her face to better conceal her identity. Given her personality, I think she'd want her costume to lean into the whole cat burglar gimmick, but not to the point of it being impractical, so I put a cat motif on things like her belt and hat and made her rope mimic a cat's tail. Overall, I wanted to mix her fun cat gimmick with more practical heist gear, and I think I did that pretty well. Here is the finished character sheet for Selina Kyle / Catwoman.
You don't recognize me. If I were alive at that point, I might have found that insulting. I'm here to protect you, Kubo. And that means you have to do as I say. So, if you don't eat, you'll be weak. If you're weak, you'll be slow. If you're slow, you'll die.
And there we have it. Despite the occasional poor decision, I do genuinely love this franchise, and I'm very excited to begin working on the villains. If you can tell, they're my favourite part. Let me know which characters you'd like to see me reimagine in the comments, because frankly, I have no idea where to start. I will also be posting the finished character sheets and speed paints on my Tumblr, link in the description, baby! And I'll see you in the next video. Bye!